Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a meeting of the North Penn School District Board of School Directors, May 27th, 1997. This meeting tonight is a special action meeting when we will vote on preliminary budget and other matters which have been previously discussed. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 5 minutes. This limit will permit time for all those who wish to speak to the board to do so. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker, and this is in reference to Board Policy 8344.2. So at this time, can we have a Pledge of Allegiance? And Mr. Tracy, would you lead us, please, sir?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, again, for maybe the third meeting in a row, I need to apologize for this board being late to start a public meeting. We are to start at 7:30, as we well know, and many of us have known that for many, many years. But at the same time, this board has been doing more business. Gentlemen, Mr. Allen, Mr. Clemens, you with us? This board has been doing more business than it's generally done in the past. We have had numerous executive sessions for matters of personnel, matters of litigation, matters of real estate. And it seems that many board members are here many hours a week, more than the 2 meetings a month we are alleged to hold. For the record, Mrs. Hatfield, please note that at 5:30 this evening, board members were here for an executive session for matters of personnel and potential litigation. And they stayed in that meeting till approximately 7:37. Ladies and gentlemen, after the close of this meeting, we will go back into executive session again for matters of personnel and potential litigation. So at this time, this is a special action agenda. We've had our Pledge of Allegiance. It's the audience of citizens. Anybody wishing to speak to the board, please come forward. Give us your name and address. Anybody? Mr. Shapensky.
Ben Sherpensky, Tomlinson Township. I see on the agenda tonight under Superintendent's Report, you're going to approve the summer program for the secondary buildings. Has there been any further discussion on the expansion of the summer library program?
No, there hasn't, Mr. Shapensky.
Is there going to be before the summer?
I think it's a matter of budget, and if the board wishes to increase the summer library services, it needs to make that clear and instruct us to transfer funds to do so.
Okay. Under other business, I hope you approve the preliminary budget. I would like to raise some concerns that I know I heard a lot of questions from different board members about some of the financing in the current budget, the question of technology and other things. And I'd like to know if you approve the budget the way it is, can you still make changes, of course, before your final adoption? Is there going to be further consideration to the additional money that Mrs. Sheriff found under salaries and some of the other departments?
Absolutely.
Has that been straightened out in this preliminary budget?
No.
No.
Is that going to reduce the preliminary budget?
It's conceivable that it could reduce it or shift funds for other uses such as technology, or even it's conceivable it could be increased. Certainly you're correct in assuming that the preliminary budget is not a final budget. It gives both the board and the public an opportunity to view the preliminary in anticipation of supporting and adopting the final.
Okay. I'd like to encourage the board members that if they do find additional savings there, that they put it towards the technology program. It's been a pretty hotly debated topic by you guys for quite a time, and it would be nice that you take that savings and put it in that area. Other than that, is there, and it's not on the agenda, I don't know if I can talk, but I'd like to ask it, is there any further developments on the final budget audit that you're doing with this preliminary budget?
We were in executive session for specifically those matters, but they were relating to specific members of personnel. So it's still at that stage.
And that still hasn't changed the preliminary budget that's being handed out, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Darcy, I saw your hand.
Hi, Marla Darcy, Upper Gwinnett. I have some concerns still with this budget. I wanted to raise 2 points. One is a question. When we went through the budget process, we were apprised that we needed 13.5 new teachers for the elementary level, 8 new teachers for the secondary level, and 1 counselor at the high school. Not having had a chance yet to look through this revised budget for tonight, are we still allotting for those number of teachers?
Those positions are still in the budget.
So the 13.5 new and the 8 new are still in tonight's budget?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Okay, as you know, a major concern of people is the reading program. Now, right now I see that you're not losing any reading positions and you're not gaining any reading positions. But what I think we have to be aware of is that whereas people used to be full-time reading specialists in buildings, they are now, many of them, 1/3 IST position specialists, and IST is the instructional support teacher. So on top of doing, they're called 67% teachers, but they're doing 100% of their job as building reading specialists. But on top of that, they're also doing a 33% job as IST teachers. So we have fewer reading personnel, and they're doing more work. If you look at these statistics, which I really feel should be passed out to it is public knowledge, and it should be passed out to the public. If maybe we could make access to it to the public. You'll see that the positions of reading now, 33% is the building reading specialist, 33% is the building guidance counselor specialist, and then you have the IST teacher in three different buildings. So that adds up to 1 reading specialist. But what's not being taken into account is even with this downsizing of personnel, the reading recovery program, which was removed, took away a full 50% of reading support. That now it doesn't have to be reading recovery that replaces it, but there is a need for some kind of reading program that will replace that will address the needs of those students. So what we did in essence was we went from 1995-96, we were at 25.85 full-time equivalents, to in 1996-97 we are at 18.35 full-time equivalents. So I know this is hard to follow, but this is very important, and I'd be glad to turn these numbers in and have them printed up for everyone. And this is critical because we're talking about, we're not getting to the children that we need to get, and even at best there were children on waiting lists for reading help. So we have to understand all these percentages.
So, Mrs. Darcy, we should have those, you know, your figures may be accurate and maybe they're not, but I want to see whose they are.
These are the statistics that I requested from Dr. Tarozzi, and she had it approved from Dr. Hassler. So they're the district statistics. So, you know, they're a public record. They just are what is.
Okay, well, Mrs. Darcy, this is, I appreciate receiving these. I'll get these out to all the board members. This is not a document that I have ever seen.
Okay, but would you be able to, I mean, you're voting on a budget, and we have a big deficit on what we need to do.
No, we're voting on a preliminary budget.
Could you, at the next meeting, get this information out to the public also?
No,
Because,
these board members will have this tomorrow.
okay.
And they'll give us a chance to look at this and ask questions of those who pulled this document together.
Mrs. Miller, could you, Dr. Haslund, respond to this deficit, supposed deficit that Mrs. Darcy's alluding to?
I
think it would be fair, you give Dr. Hassler and everybody that's just been given this some time.
I can address, I think, what this represents is no change from the status quo that we recognized at the beginning of this school year. And I believe, if I remember your numbers, the difference is 7. reading teachers. And those are 7 reading recovery teachers
Right.
that were removed from the budget when it was adopted in June of 1996 for the 96-97 school year. So the board may not have seen these numbers represented as they are, which you'll receive shortly, but they represent the reduction made last year in the number of reading teachers from essentially 25 to roughly 18.
Right, and then I want to just direct your attention, in addition to that, to please look at how the building specialists are being further stretched by having a 3rd position as IST positions, and also the repercussions from not having any type of remedial or reading recovery program, and how that is reflecting the numbers of children at the lower end, that the reading specialists who are responsible for every level of reading in the building, from gifted support to everything, how many more students they're dealing with. So I think we have a very, very serious problem here, and I really think it needs immediate attention, and that everybody's really clear on it, including the community.
Well, I appreciate the information you shared with us. As I mentioned before, this is a preliminary budget. This will go immediately to all board members tomorrow. This will be assigned under Mrs. Krieger and Mr. Allen. This is their, I believe this is their committee, and they will be with Dr. Hassler to get a more clear understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Darcy. Anybody else, please? Yes, Mrs. Whitworth.
I just have a couple of questions. One is, I may still be confused and missing this, but at what point is technology going to be put into this preliminary budget? That's a question, a logistical question.
Okay, we believe aspects of technology, in terms of the money, the funding, will be in this, to some extent, will be in this budget, preliminary budget, as it's passed tonight. There are budget reserves that will be more fully explained under Mr. Tracy's report at the appropriate time, that lays out that there are dollars that this board needs to determine as to how much they wish to place to technology, to operating if they wish, to other projects. But there is I believe, approximately $6.6 million of cash reserves that has to be allocated. The lump sum is there. It's under a preliminary budget total amount. But then as we approach, but there's a $1.5 and $5.1 million in the budget. But as we approach the final budget, there'll be a greater articulation as to the amounts.
But there definitely will be
Technology dollars, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And will it be spelled out what they're going to be used for?
They must be, this board demands that.
But I mean, will we get it before
course.
before the final?
Because we want you to know what we're doing. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. My next question is the extra guidance counselor at the high school still in the budget?
Yes.
Also, okay. And also, I don't know if this is possible or not, but I've asked this several years in the past. I find it very confusing when we see the first budget that was presented in April, and then we see the budget that's available tonight, to sort through all that and figure out what's different about it. Would it be possible for you to put out just a 2 or 3 page sheet of this is where the cuts are, so that we know what's been eliminated?
We've had board members ask for that sheet themselves, and I believe that's in the process of being formulated.
Will
Because
be
there's
able-
been significant changes through the budget since, this is a May 14th. I should note that that is a different date and a different release than you have been working from. And as we further continue our working relationship with Mr. Tracy, we anticipate more changes yet to come, not only in how this budget is laid out and the business operations themselves, but also in terms of substantive dollars in specific line item areas.
So it would be possible for the public to get some kind of a sheet that says this is what was, like for instance, staff development being cut in half.
Correct.
That would be listed as one of the cuts.
We had a sheet like that last year's budget, and I know the board members had really appreciated receiving that, and we're going to have to do it again this year.
So we could get it in the Public Relations Office in a couple of weeks? Or?
I'm hoping that we would have it by the next budget meeting. Help me with the date. When is our next meeting?
Well,
Meeting of
it's
the
the
board?
committee meeting, our regularly scheduled committee meeting.
Which is
That's
dated
the 7th.
June 10th.
June 10th?
Mrs. Whitworth, I'm hoping that this board and the public will have that June 10th.
Okay. Okay, I just have a question for Mr. Bartle. Can I
Sure.
ask him a specific question concerning the auditor's work that's being done? I may be confused about this, but it's my understanding that according to Pennsylvania school code, The auditors can only look for things that were specified in the contract, and if it wasn't in the contract, then they are specifically restricted from looking for it. So, and I asked the question at the last meeting, were they going to be looking for things like negligence or misuse of funds and those kind of things? And the answer was, yes, they're going to be looking for everything. But I went back and got the contract, and in the contract there is no mention that they can look for those things. And if the school code says they can't look for them unless they're in the contract, then my question is, how can they look for them?
I think you're talking about two different things. First of all, this particular document and the firm that's been retained is not the annual audit of the school district. Technically, I would not consider what was being done here with respect to this matter an audit. Although it's been categorized as that, I guess, in a general sense, I would not consider it to be an audit. It is not what you're referring to in the school code as the annual audit of the accounts of the district. With respect to this particular matter, I would not comment further because I do believe that what this document refers to may lead to some discussions with respect to personnel matters. So at this point, I would not comment further with respect to that. But I believe that the section you're reading and alluding to deals with the general annual audit of the school district, and not that which the board has independently done with respect to the department due to the departure of an employee.
So in other words, this audit that the contract was given on April 2nd or April 14th or something like that doesn't have to go by the rules in the school code?
Well, I didn't say that. I think what you're referring to, as I said, is the language with respect to the annual audit of the district. This is not that, and therefore those rules do not apply to something that is not an audit and is not the audit to which you're referring. But more than that, I don't want to say because what I may say may impact on a personnel matter, and I would respectfully decline to comment with regard to any personnel matter.
Okay, but eventually when we get the report back from the auditor, then you'll be willing to comment more at that time?
I would comment at an appropriate time. Exactly when that will be, I don't know. It will depend on the nature of the report and to the extent that it may involve a personnel matter.
Okay, thank you.
Or a matter of potential litigation. Correct, Mr. Board?
Well, if that's an eventuality,
Anybody else, please? Yes, sir. I can't see that.
I'm Bob Pearson, and I live at 222 Rabbit Run in Montgomery Township. I'm 77 years old. I think the brain is still improving a little. I'm a former teacher at Drexel, and I've taught graduate work at Drexel and the University of Pennsylvania. 40-some years ago, I had earned enough credits for a doctorate, and that's at the University of California in California and Indiana, or Purdue University. Unfortunately, there is no place like Villanova or Drexel or Penn State that would give a doctorate's thesis. And I wanted to go to Northwestern, but I had a family and just couldn't make it. And I still don't have it. But what I'm here tonight for is for the last 7 years, I have gone to about 20 school districts. Unfortunately, I haven't gone to North Penn. I mean, I've asked before, but I haven't been accepted. On U.S. geography is alive. And in tutoring students and giving before tests, that's one thing that's very important. If we gave before and after tests in modern math, we would never have had it. But I have tested geography where they had it just this last year, let's say, and the marks are low, very low. And then for several hours, I give geography, for U.S. geography, states and capitals and rivers and all that, and their marks are increased, and they retain it. Now, what I hope to do is to do it here. I'm a North Penn resident, I'm a homeowner, and this is the closest school district. You have, in my opinion, a good, excellent school, but I have methods where we can even be better. Now, I also believe in math, thinking math. Half the math SATs are for 4th, 5th, 6th grade. If we start in 4th, 5th, 6th grades in adding to our math curriculum these problems in SATs, by the time they get to be 11th grade, the familiarity will be there, and their marks in SATs will be better. At times we hear excuses that the SATs are low. They would be so high here, we'd never have to state that. Also, I give American history by American presidents. And that seems to be received in good order in the various school systems. Now, you know, these are all basic courses. This is the meat and potatoes. It's not the dessert. So I just wanted to mention that part. And I have my workbook, geography, and also, now this might create a little problem. I don't like to be called Mr. Pearson in class. I like to be called Mr. Bob. So everything is Mr. Bob's this and Mr. Bob's that. But I have 137 ways to streamline public education with a decrease in costs. Now, I would guarantee we would be #1 in the state and even in the United States if we took the practical ones here and applied them. Now, I will say, Dr. Hassler I met, and he gave my ear for some time. And I just wanted to make it a little more public of what we said. So, and my resume is here, and those two. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Bob, thank you so much for coming out. I haven't seen you here for a while, but I'm glad you're here. You're forgiven. You're forgiven. You haven't been here in a long time. And I want to hear more about from Dr. Hassler as to his the time that he spent with you. If Dr. Hassler would fill the board in on that appointment, that'd be great in memo, or the next time we can get a chance to talk about it. Also, Mr. Weir, if we could have a copy for every member of the board. Thank you, Bob. Anybody else, please? Mrs. Olkowski.
June Olkowski, Tomanson Township. In line with our audit that's going on now, I would like to recommend to the board that we conduct a time study of our administrative and clerical staff, particularly in the areas of public relations. We're spending, I'd say, well over $250,000 in benefits and salary for our two administrators in this area alone, and there are also a number of clerical staff. I believe, say, about 10 or 12 clerical staff assigned to that area. This represents a huge amount of our budget, and I think some of this money could better be spent on student-related activities. I'm also very concerned whenever I've asked for time accounts of how long the calendar takes to prepare the newsletter or any other documents, that I always get an answer of nobody knows. Recently, I asked about the time we spent with Mrs. Whitaker's documentary film, and I just today received a memo stating that no records were kept. I find it hard to believe that our staff members have no idea how much time they spent on a project. I'm not asking for minute-by-minute accounts, I'm asking for rough estimates. In line with the preliminary budget approval tonight, I would like to recommend to the board that we drop the newsletter. Again, I think this is money that can better be spent buying computers and replacing 30-year-old textbooks. This memo I received today lists simply the printing and postage and such cost for the newsletter of $6,594. This does not include photography. Do we have a photographer on staff, or did we pay for photography?
We do not have a staff photographer.
Well, I don't see photography cost on here.
The board picture, Dr. Hassler's picture, Judy Miller's picture. Those photographs were taken gratis by Marin Studio, the senior yearbook photographer, at my request. Was there an additional photograph? Those photographs were gratis.
Thank you. I also had requested staff time, and again, I have not received any account of staff time. And I would suggest that there are other things our staff could do better, and if we have all kinds of extra public relations time, then perhaps there should be some cuts in that department. Thank you.
Mrs. Okowski, I don't know how to respond to your demands for staff time, because I'm aware of how much staff time is devoted to responding to you. And I would rather see that staff time go to things that directly affect children in the operation of the school district. I'll cite an example. September, October, your fascination with dropout rates, and the fact that I learned that you called 3 different staff members, asked them the same questions, including me, my office, and got copies of the same report from all 3 of us. That is not a good and useful use of our time.
Excuse me,
and it's not, may I finish my comment? And it's not a good use of this staff's time, and I believe sincerely it's a waste of taxpayers' dollars. I think some of this is related to some kind of thing you have for individuals that has nothing to do with the quality of their work or the performance of their duties, and I really don't like to have 3 individuals getting the same phone call, providing the same information, not knowing what the left hand and the right hand is doing. That is not a good and useful investment of the taxpayers' dollars.
Dr. Bose, I greatly resent your remarks.
Well,
First of all, I am concerned, as you are, with tax money. That's why I'm up here. I have been coming to these meetings for the past the past 8 years, since 1989, concerned about tax issues. I became concerned about the dropout rate last June when I heard there were something like 35 students who would not graduate with their class. I then began looking into that matter. It took me from June until October to get Xeroxes of those reports. Now, I realize the state report for last year did not go in until October, but the 2 previous years should have been available. The reason I called 3 staff members was because I tried all summer to get those reports and could not understand why simple Xeroxes were not available. The staff members I called referred me to other staff members who they said would have the material, and that's why I continued calling other staff members.
And you'll recall that my office told you that's all available in a state report that's available from anybody who requested of Harrisburg. And in fact, it would give you more information. It would show you the state average, and that North Penn is below the state average.
Well, excuse me, I don't think I should have to go to Harrisburg for information about my local school district.
The same telephone call.
No, a telephone call and probably being rude to 10 people at taxpayers' money in Harrisburg. And I believe that's why we have a public relations staff to answer questions by the residents of this district. And if, as I have heard from several sources, our public relations staff spend considerable time aiding Mrs. Riddicker, who lives in New York and has nothing to do with this school district.
Well, that's not true. Because you say it doesn't make it
Now you're
true.
interrupting me, Dr. Bose.
Yes, I did, because I'm going to
Madam
correct.
President, I don't think we should turn this into a debate on
uh,
this floor here.
errors when I hear them.
Well, I'm discussing errors as well, and I think it's the duties of our public relations staff to answer the questions and the request for information from our residents. And the things I have requested have been very few. Often I have had to make repeated calls for the same information. It took me a week to get a simple copy of what Mrs. Mengel read last week at the board meeting. And I think it is purposeful obstruction of my request because you know I'm concerned about how our monies are being spent.
Okay, Mrs. Olkowski, that wraps up your 5 minutes.
Well, Dr. Bose,
Anybody else? Mrs. Abrams.
Linda Abram, Upper Gwinnett. Can't even speak. With regards to the preliminary budget adoption, assuming that it is successful tonight and the preliminary budget is adopted, I understand that on June the 10th, at the committee meeting, we will again discuss the budget. Is that what I understand?
Correct.
Will there be other agenda items on that meeting as well, or is that specifically for further discussion about the budget?
That's the general work session, I believe, and that would include other matters that have to be taken care of in this district aside from this budget.
The final budget adoption is scheduled for June the 19th, I believe.
Is that accurate?
That is being moved.
That's being moved to June.
That is being moved to June 26th.
Okay.
Mrs. Hatfield, please note that for the record, and also, Mr. Brewer, make sure that's duly advertised.
Is
When I
the,
gave the finance report, I
no,
was
go
going to
ahead.
give it. Maybe I can help you first
Yeah.
of all. We will be having additional meetings. Since it is a committee meeting, it will be up to the discretion of the administration as to what that full agenda would be. It's not to be evasive on me in answering your question. We do not know yet because we have not been forwarded that committee meeting agenda. However, the budget will be very much a part of it. Also, for the questions that are on personnel, there have not been any personnel positions removed from this budget from the that was first introduced. So there's no surprises there. You will see differences in some of the numbers because Mr. Tracy has done a lot of work as far as fine-tuning the accuracy of the numbers.
okay.
But, so everyone knows there were no programs cut, to my knowledge. There have been no personnel positions cut from the from the beginning budget.
Okay, a couple questions. So the date of the 19th is being moved to the 26th.
We will still have one.
Yeah,
So there will still be a meeting on the
the
19th?
final adoption of the budget will be the 26th.
Okay, and that will be a special night. What I'm trying to understand, I don't mean to be evasive, but what I'm trying to understand is you're meeting tonight, and you're going to adopt a preliminary budget, and then what I was hearing was you were meeting on June the 10th.
Correct.
Where the public could participate in that, and then 10 days later, or 9 days later, we were going to approve a final. It didn't seem like there was a whole lot of time in there to...
So, and the 19th we'll meet again.
Okay.
That's a formal action meeting.
Right.
And then there'll be a special action for purposes of adopting the final budget.
On the 26th.
Now, that doesn't preclude if things or any matters would change here in the district that would cause us to call for another special action between the 9th and the 19th.
Okay.
But those are the set dates as we know them tonight.
Okay. I know that you had mentioned that there were no, I guess, positions cut. I don't mean to put words in your mouth. Maybe you could rephrase that. There were no changes in personnel. Is that how you phrased it, Mrs. Scher?
From the beginning budget?
Right.
There were, to my knowledge, there's been, I know of no positions that have been cut that were originally placed into the budget. All of that lies ahead right now basically out on the table for the administration, and certainly there's spending to be addressed, and Mr. Tracy and Dr. Bose and Cabinet will be working and using the time that they have now to between now and June 26th.
Okay. So as we look at the positions that we were hopeful to maintain, that is to say at elementary, 13 and a half, and 8 at secondary, and then the high school additional guidance counselor, these meetings that are coming, we could potentially be addressing their maintenance or disappearance in the budget. With regards to then the modulars that may be of concern at this point at the elementary level, if those modulars are not successful in fruition, would it then obviously reflect changes in those positions. If we aren't able to put modulars at Nash and Inglewood, for instance, you would need teachers in those rooms. Would we then be talking about aides in place of those teachers?
Absolutely. I know that there are backup plans in the event that there's a problem with the modulars, to our best understanding this evening, and that'll be laid out later by Art, and also within this budget, preliminary budget, that we are still on task with and on schedule with the mods.
Okay. And I don't want to reiterate anything, but I do want to say that I think our Public Relations Department does a fine job, and I also think that the people need to realize that when we look at ourselves and we look at other districts, there's an incredible amount of information that is generated from a district of this size, and the only way to keep the community informed and educated is by producing documents that are of quality, and that inform the people of the things that are going on to make us continually proud of who we are and what we're all about. That is not an easy job done, I'm sure, by anybody other than the people who do the job here. And I, for one, say that I think they do a wonderful job. And it is sad when people feel that they're not being answered, but I think that you need to keep perspective as to what you're asking and how many times you ask. I think most of us have come forth and asked for information, receive it as readily as they can give it to us. They are very busy people, as I know everybody in the administration is. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Anybody else, please? Art.
Art Ramsey, North Wales. I wanted, last year in our newspaper, that's the taxpayers, we were worried about the deficit of $114 million. I haven't had a chance to go over this budget, but is that being taken care of in your preliminary budget or your final budget, the $114 million that we were in debt for?
I'm dead. You said deficit.
Our debt service? You mean our debt service? Our debt service picture is totally now in the hands of Mr. Tracy, who is going through every aspect and detail of our debt service, and not only will it reflect this point in the preliminary budget, but it will be fine-tuned completely and must be for the final budget.
Perhaps it's helpful.
It isn't something that goes away.
To answer the question directly, the debt is being retired on schedule. I think what you heard was the total indebtedness. And like a mortgage on a house, we pay so much of that off a year, and it's on schedule to be retired.
But the taxpayer isn't going to be penalized, and you're not going to float any more bonds or anything to cover this thing, right?
Not our schedule.
Good. Now, another question, is the buses being taken care of financially that we're going to have to buy and everything in this budget?
Yeah, they're actually, Mr. Ramsey, we're entering into a lease purchase program for 7 72-passenger buses that will be 1 year old. And we're specifying them accordingly, having them 1 year old with less than 17,500 miles on them. And as far as the 5 minivans, they're going to be an outright purchase.
The reason I asked this question, I noticed coming out of Pembroke that half of those buses aren't filled, and other schools are running half full too, some of those buses. Do you recognize that too?
We do recognize that, and I think if you go back and look at our assignment of seats, and especially this time of the year, when kids are hopping rides with parents, staying for other activities after school, we assign our buses to the maximum capacity that we can on a given route. So a lot of the empty seats you see actually are assigned to youngsters, but they're not necessarily riding buses.
I see. Well, I understand that a lot of children stay for sports, like I used to have to, and they don't get home till 6, 7 o'clock at night. Therefore, that's why I'm seeing these empty buses, right?
They may be, it's possible that they're staying for sports in the spring, but they don't participate in the fall and the winter, and as a result, they're on the bus.
Part a lot of it too is bikes. Once we have nice weather, kids walk, take bikes, hop rides with friends, do things they don't normally do on a maximum capacity situation like the dead of winter.
So there's no way we can save any more money there, right, Art?
There's no way that we can schedule them any more efficiently than we do, because we always run the fear that on a given day, every youngster is going to show up for that bus. And that's
It's hard to control it.
It's something that's very hard to control. I mean, if you take a 72-passenger bus and schedule 92 youngsters in it, there may be those days throughout the year that all 92 youngsters show up to ride the bus, and then you have a unique problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Art, what sport did you play?
3 sports,
Get out.
basketball, football, and baseball.
What do you know?
And I'm in the Hall of Fame in Conshohocken.
There you go.
Yeah.
And we have you now.
Right.
Okay, anybody else, please? Mrs. Olkowski, last round, second round, folks, and then we'll get back to business.
June Yolkowski, Tomenson Township. It's not what I came up here originally to say, but since we're on the subject of buses, I had suggested way back when Dr. Elko was still here that those students who know they will probably never ride a bus, state so to our staff, and then we could eliminate those spaces on the buses. Dr. Elko's reply was that his own family was a prime example of that because he dropped his sons at the high school on his way to this building. He said it was a good suggestion, it would be looked into. I never heard anything further. Now, what I would like to say is I find Dr. Bowe's remarks totally unconscionable, coming from somebody in his position to a member of the public who is paying a portion of his very large salary. I refuse to be intimidated by him, by anyone else in the administration, or by this board. And I hope no one else will be so intimidated. I am here asking simply for things that are matters of public record and that should be available in a reasonable amount of time to the public. And this is an audience of citizens, and members of the public have their 5 minutes to do whatever they want up here, even read in the phone book. And I refuse, again, to be intimidated or to be looked at like I have some kind of vendetta against somebody on this staff. That is not true. It has never been true. And if my questions irritate people, perhaps it's because they're hitting home and that there are things that should be looked at. To get back to the issue of the dropouts, my concern was because of the large number of dropouts. When I finally received the reports that took me from June to October to get, I found that our dropout rates over 3 years were averaging in the 8 to 10% rate of the number of students entering 10th grade. I found that number shocking for a wealthy school district with a highly educated population and a $110 million school budget, something like $8,000 or $9,000 per student per year. I asked at that time that the administration and teachers get together and see what could be done to lower this dropout rate. So far, I have heard of no new programs. I think these are the kinds of things we should be doing in this district and not worrying about little newsletters and other little nice, funsy things to make everybody feel good. I think the job of this district is education, and education should be our priority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hassler, would you please get out to Mrs. Olkowski as quickly as you can, lists of various programs and, various programs that we do have to address the dropout rate, starting with this board approving the PASS program last year. Okay, anybody else, please? Okay, before we get back to the business of the day, Mr. Gerhardt, how's your grandmother?
Good.
Would you please take his picture again? His grandmother asked if she could have another shot. Hi, Grandma. Thank you. Okay. And he keeps coming back, and so does Grandma. Dr. Bose.
The first recommendation of the superintendent's report is to request the board's approval for the employment of assistant principals in the secondary schools for 63 days as presented on the item 63-97 for a cost of $20,512. And also to remind the board of my suggestion in the weekly correspondence that we consider making this the last year of that annual exercise, and as some board members themselves have suggested, that we adjust the annual schedule so that this is no longer a practice in our school district.
I need a motion. Motion by Scher.
Second.
Second by Hill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed would say nay.
I
Nay.
had a question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask for a roll call. Now, how do I undo that, Solicitor?
You can take comments first and then do your roll call.
Very good. Mr. Mosey.
In your original green sheet to us, Dr. Hassler, dated May the 1st, we had 6 days for Pembroke, 6 days for Penfield, and 12 days for Pendale. I see you've increased that now by 15 additional days, 12, 12, and 15 respectively. Can I ask why?
That was a mistake on my part. I was looking at the number of days.
May 1st was the mistake?
That was a mistake. When I went back and checked and looked at what we did last year, there was additional days that were distributed. Last year we had a total of 80 days that were used. So that was just a basic mistake on my part.
And also, you, on this new green sheet, you did not indicate the number of personnel we're talking about. Could you, is it the same 4, 1, 1, 2?
Basically, yes. However, the difference this year is that the days will be requested through my office for those people that will be working the days in the summertime.
So,
but basically, we're looking at 4, 1, 1, and 2.
All right. So actually, 63 days might even be reduced then.
Possibly,
You're
yes.
asking for a maximum of 63.
Maximum of 63.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Krieger.
Thank you, Mr. Mosey. You asked all my questions.
Mr. Allen.
No.
Clemens. Hill. Sure.
A question here. I thought that at the high school, we were going to have a reduction in supplemental days when we addressed the issue of an associate principal in the form of Bert Hines, and that part of that was an extension of his work calendar as well as job responsibilities that was going to offset some of those, be offset by a reduction in those summer days.
That is reflected.
So you used last year's numbers.
Well, last year was 52 days at the high school and 28 at the middle school.
Okay.
And Mr. Scher, that's still an intention. As you know,
Right.
this year is an unusual year with respect to the change in student parking and the work that we'll have to do this summer preparing for that. While it's still a total reduction of days, there are some extenuating circumstances unique to the summer of '97 that we don't expect to repeat.
Okay. Well, Dr. Bose, you know how I felt for a long time in changing those job descriptions for the period of time in which employees worked for these positions, that we were regularly throwing out supplemental income to cover.
I think you and I agree that that ought to be something that's built into the year-long work, and not a matter of annual consideration or reconsideration.
Looking to have more flexibility in the work calendar for employees so that we can cover these vacation days and other services in another form. Thank you. I think it's important.
Mr. Schilling.
No.
Mr. White. Roll call, Mr. Weir.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mrs. Krieger?
No.
Mr. Mosey?
Yes.
Mrs. Scher?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Ms. Mingle?
No.
I have 7 voting yes and 2 voting no.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Hassler, thank you for just admitting you made a mistake.
Sure.
It's really that simple and it's that painless sometimes. Okay.
If
Go
I
ahead, sir.
may, Madam President.
Sure.
Board members have been hearing some stories perhaps of concern about modulars that are planned for Nash and Inglewood. And Mr. Wood and I have an update to give you. I should say Mr. Wood has an update to give you which reflects discussions as early as 3 o'clock this afternoon. And Art, I'd ask you to give the board a quick update on where we are.
It's informational.
Tomorrow evening, we will be before the supervisors of Tall Medicine, and they will hopefully approve a resolution that will allow the placement of 2 modulars at Nash and 1 at Inglewood, as well as further discussion regarding the high school addition. And we're encouraged by that. We had an excellent session this afternoon with township staff as it relates to putting the modules at both Englewood and Nash. And we would encourage neighbors such as Mrs. Collins to come out and support us tomorrow night at the Tom Edson Township meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Never seen
Dr.
it.
Booth, I would just like to ask that at our regular committee meeting, if the, no, that wouldn't be the appropriate place, I guess it would be action meeting when we get committee reports. If the board could just be updated on the modular situations at the other schools as well.
Sure.
Where we are in the process.
We'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you've got B yet.
Yes. And now a recommendation related to the adoption of the preliminary budget, which is before you, in the amount of $11,855,149, which is, again, a preliminary budget. It provides that...
Right, yeah.
I did. Actually, the next item is the recommendation for employing summer school staff and salaries as listed on BA-2. And this is, as the board knows, subject to sufficient enrollments to offer the class.
So moved.
Motion by Stelling, I need a second.
Second.
Second by Whites. Board questions to the right? Left? Yes.
Just total number of hours, please.
Or anticipated hours? Doctor, would you have that?
5 weeks.
How many hours a day is summer?
I believe it's 4 hours, 5 hours a day.
And it's 5 weeks.
Like 5 weeks.
Yes.
And it's all contingent upon enrollment.
Right.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, would say nay. Thank you. What you've been waiting for.
And now the adoption of the preliminary budget. It's presented in the amount of $111,855,149, which is a figure that may undergo change and revision as the board and the staff work toward a final adoption now scheduled for the 26th of June. And this completes our obligation under law to adopt a preliminary budget and provide opportunity for the public to inspect it prior to a final adoption.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. This equates in mills to exactly how much? Mr. Wood?
0 mil increase.
0 mills. Okay. Board questions to the left.
I don't have a question, Mrs. Mengel, but it was brought up earlier during the audience of citizens that they be provided with a list of the cuts or projected cuts. I'd also want to point out that Mrs. Shear and I had a meeting with Mr. Tracy last week, and part of that meeting was the fact that we also will give a list of where the increases are. We don't want to send a false message to the community that we're strictly going to be making cuts. Some cuts may have to be made, and we want to show people why, because there are some substantial increases in some areas that we don't have any control over. So thank you.
And Mr. Wood, is that your understanding with Mr. Tracy and Finance that that document's going to be prepared?
We will be meeting tomorrow morning, as early as tomorrow morning, with Mrs. Scherer and Mr. Moser.
Do you feel that document could be ready and in the hands of this board before the June 10th meeting?
I talked briefly with Tom a few minutes ago about that. It would be his call. We think that probably with a little bit of due diligence, we can make that happen.
Giddy up. Okay, thank you, sir. Mrs. Craver, around. Questions? Mr. Allen? Mr. Clemens?
I'd just like to make one comment. As we do near final adoption of the budget, and as we look for dollars, especially in the area of technology, and certainly technology has been buzzword, whether it be in the papers, whether it be during the campaign. Something I said at least a month ago, and I will continue to be an advocate for, is that whatever we do with technology, is that this district would take a serious look at paying for it with cash. And if the dollars aren't there as we near the final adoption of the budget, I would certainly be one that would support an increase in the budget or an increase of mills to take care of paying for technology out of cash. So.
I I think that's some of what finance and many members of the board are looking at there. We know we have cash reserves and it's deciding how they should be spent. Do we use cash reserves for those one-time items in the area of technology, be it for the business office or the students, and tax for operating, or vice versa, or a little bit of everything? But this budget, I am so glad to be able to say, is really getting cleaned up, and there's a lot of due diligence going on, a lot of hard work from Dr. Bose, his staff, particularly Art Wood, now with Tom Tracy on deck, and the Finance Committee. So I'm real pleased, and I know that there is more than a majority of commitment to spending some cash on technology. And I think we're more than well on our way to cleaning up technological needs here at the office. So, Mr. Hill.
No questions.
Mr. Scher.
Yes, Finance Liaison. First, I'd like to welcome Tom Tracy to the audience and to the community. I'd also like to straighten out classification of his job responsibilities. I've heard many papers, I've seen them report that he's here to audit the budget. He's here to serve as our interim financial director, which at this point in time is revising the budget, reviewing the numbers, and working towards bringing forward a proposal for the board. Has been his most immediate charge, but he will be serving as our interim financial director from now on through until at which time we're able to perform a search and replace him, or otherwise he moves forward. So I wanted that cleared up as far as his job description. There seem to be a lot of people believing we've got 3 different auditors all on board, and when in fact neither one of them are quite accurately described as auditors, either Deloitte or Touche or Mr. Tracy. Direction from the board regarding some comments made about all the increases and decreases in the budget. I'd like to say that the audience, anyone who's going to go home and compare the 2 books, really needs to realize there are some changes all throughout this budget in the area of personnel figures that are not a change in the number of people. It's simply that using more detailed and up-to-date information. Mr. Tracy has gone through and actually placed the salaries direct from payroll reports into the budget by line item. So you're going to see changes there which really do not change the operations that were first proposed. And I don't want anyone looking. In other words, reading. Reading was pulled out as a separate line item. That was brought up tonight. It was previously at $1.6 million. In fact, as Tom's gone through, he actually found it to be, there's over $2 million in funding that really is dedicated to our reading personnel staff. But that has now been incorporated by building level. A reading specialist at Gwinnett Square is now under the Gwinnett Square line item rather than as a separate pull-out line item. So those are going to be changes that if he has to note every single change in the dollar figures from the previous budget, he'd probably have a couple hundred entries to present to us. So I think it would be best if he limits it to actual changes in the function.
Increases, decreases, not corrections.
Right, not corrections and
That's
adjustments such as that. And I just will repeat, it is a working document. He has worked very hard, he and the administration, to put the budget into a new format for us to distribute the suspense account figures that were at the back. But there is still a lot of work to be done on this budget now that the administration has a more accurate document to look at. They certainly are still, from what I've gathered, feedback, they certainly intend to roll up their sleeves and still look to see what can be done to refine it even further in the terms and numbers. And we will definitely have to deal with the issue of recurring, of the use of recurring revenues for recurring expenses as opposed to extraordinary revenues, and that deals with your issue on technology. So, Tom, I think that Mr. Tracy's been given some direction to see what can be done to designate some capital project funding from that beginning cash reserve that we began with and was distributed throughout the budget in other spending areas for the specific purpose of technology.
Okay. Mr. Schilling. Mr. Weitz. Okay, folks, it may be no secret that Mr. Tracy is here to clean up this budget as we have known it from the past. This budgets in the past have been admittedly a rat's hairdo to try and appreciate. And he is here trying to make sure that these line items are properly assigned, that these line items are more clear to understand for the public. And I thank Finance Committee, and also really appreciate Mr. Tracy being here, and he's going to be here for a while until this is completely cleaned up. All in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed would say nay. You like rat's hair, do you, don't you?
I neglected to introduce Tom Tracy, who you've all figured out is a stranger among us, and to publicly acknowledge that he's been a good find. He's the president and CEO of the National Management Associates. He is a veteran school business manager, comes highly recommended from a variety of sources, all of which have been checked out. And now that I put you on the spot, Tom, I wonder if you might want to give the board any advice, as well as our guests, as to how we're going about the business of finishing this budget, putting it in order, and what you might advise the board to consider as we approach the final budget.
Before Tom starts...
Without taking half an hour, Tom.
Before Tom starts, Mrs. Hatfield, we did take a vote, and it is a matter of record now, and the vote is in. So everything now from Mr. Tracy is information.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
That's all right.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to be here, to tell you the truth. I do this I started this as a hobby, and it ended up being a job in many districts. I've been in something like 32 districts in the last 6 years, doing a variety of things. And 2 years ago, I spent 9 months in Octorara doing the same thing with their budget. The one thing I will comment on the difference is that their budget was, at that point, $18 million. And we had, at one point, something over 150 to 175 people in the audience for a $111 million budget, and I see about 20-some people here.
Pretty sad.
Sort of shocking to me. Okay. I'm sort of camera shy, and I hear this club.
You're making him a wreck.
But anyway, let me just give you some comments about the budget. When I initially came in and looked at the budget, again, I've been here 7 days, to give you some perspective. 3 days after I was here, I had to have a tentative budget to the work session of the board. So if you're going through a 200-page document and a $100 million budget, it's kind of difficult to do and know everything in 7 days. And I am not going to sit here and tell you that I do. But I've worked hard at getting a handle on your budget, and I think I have a pretty good handle now of where some of the problem areas are. One of the biggest problems in the budget was, because of the way it was done in the past, and this has no reflection on any individual, whether it be board, administration, or anybody else, the budget was formatted so it's very difficult to read, because there were areas in it that were laid out as netted figures rather than as positive figures. So where a early retirement benefit, for example, where there was actually cost of early retirement for people who were getting $24,000 over 2 years, plus, or they had the option to take medical insurance to 65. That's a cost. The savings are in the fact that you hire a less expensive staff member to take their place, and therefore you pay less Social Security and less retirement. They're the savings. They should be on the line item within that salary category. It's elementary teachers, it should be in that side. The retirement belongs in 200 series. Okay, what was happening was it was being netted out, and so something that was really $300,000 in cost and 200 and some thousand in savings was netted out to be $180,000 as a net. And then it was backtracked during the year into the various salary categories. But then when you try and go from this year's budget to last year's budget, you have no comparison. The people aren't the same. The salaries aren't the same because they were hits. That was the most difficult part in going through the entire budget. For example, all the retirement for last year, $3,300,000 was in the reserve account in the back of the budget. Okay, now that is a perfectly legitimate count. The 5800 series is a perfectly legitimate count. It's used when you don't know where items go until salaries are posted. It's okay to use during the year. For example, you pay retirement every pay. So when you pay it, it's not necessarily applied to a salary because you pay it quarterly and the state reimburses you their half about 2 months later. In order to calculate that, you use the suspense account, which is the 5800 series. Perfectly all right during the year, but it should not be a budget item. During the budget, it should be salaries times the retirement rate belongs in a 200 series right underneath the salary that it represents. And that's the way we've done it in this budget. If you already looked at some of the changes, you won't be able to follow because we took that money, it's back where it belongs now. That's probably the hardest part of the budget, to understand why it was done. The other thing we're trying to do is, if you look budget to budget, you know, in this budget right now, the way it's presented, you have a 5% increase, basically, budget to budget. If you look estimated to budget, you have approximately an 8% increase. But a lot of that can be, the estimated column, when you use it, you have to understand that there's a lot of items in the estimated column that appeared in the budget column last year and will appear in the budget column next year, but they don't appear in the estimated column. For example, your budget reserve, the 5900 series, you have $1,500,000 in that column. But if you don't spend it, it doesn't appear in estimated expenditures. But it does appear in the new budget again. So there you're looking at $1.5 million. So really, you reduced that 100, you know, that 8% is now reduced significantly because that figure doesn't belong in there. It's just it's a wash figure, and it's not spent unless you spend it. And there are some of the things you have to realize when, and I'll be working with the board so they understand it. The other serious thing I see in the budget, and both Donna and Vicki have alluded to it, is the use of balance to fund operating costs. Okay, let me just give you a real quick example of what will happen next year, not this year, but next year, if this budget is passed tonight, if this was the final passage of this budget. If this was the final passage of the budget, you're using $5.6 million of balance. That's equivalent to 19.5 mils. So therefore, to fund this operating budget, you are not using millage of 19.5, which it would be. You are using fund balance. Okay. That means next year, to start, before you do anything else, forget all the increase, just to fund the current budget, next year, you would need to raise 19.5 mils to start. There's other areas in there would be represented in the same way. In the debt service area, there are areas where you have to be very careful because you're looking at reducing debt by a means other than milling. And I know mills are an awful thing if you're a taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer in another district, and I have the same problems you taxpayers do. But again, you have to look at the effects of what you do in the future. Somebody come up here and talk about the amount of debt. The debt increase is one area of your budget, and that's the debt service area. But you only pay debt on an ongoing, and here in the district they've tried to do a wraparound. So the debt after a few years it will be very consistent, and you won't have to mill for it anymore because it's going to be consistent down the road. So if you mill for it once, it's there. If you don't mill for it once, though, then you're paying for it out of balance. And this year you had a bond issue in December. The December was called 1996 series. That issue created $1.6 million worth of debt service in this current year. Okay, so that means for next year you have to get $1.6 million. Right now it's being taken out of balance to budget this budget, or the sale of a future property, which may happen during this year. So those kind of things I'm going to be addressing the board and the taxpayers, hopefully, to bring it to your attention. The board and the administration have a lot to do with this budget. All the line items that have to be gone through. You have $1.4 million in new salaries in this budget. You have approximately $1,251,000 in raises in this budget, negotiated raises, and that's, again, something you have to consider. This year, you remember your negotiated contract is only, raises for this year are only half year. So half year of raises is $952,000. A full year of raises is $1.9 million. So next year you're going to be looking at $1.9 million, or this year you're looking at $1 million. So next year, just for that figure, you're going to be looking for somewhere in the vicinity of 4 mils, just to fund the second half of the contract. So these are the kind of things I have to bring to the attention of the, and we got a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, Dr. Bose, we have another recommendation.
The last recommendation for the board to consider is approval of engaging the services of Jeffrey Parkhouse of Indian Valley Appraisal Company to conduct an appraisal of the KBF Associates Brookside Apartments at a fee not to exceed $3,000.
Need a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Hill,
Second.
second by Whites. Questions to the right? To the left? All in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed would say nay. I abstain. Mr. Weir, Mrs. Hatfield, please. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?